Cedar on the Majority Report on the phone. It is a pleasure to welcome back to the program the TYT correspondent. I think there may be a couple others, but
I'm the most important one.
But the most important TYT correspondent, Emma Vigeland. Emma, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So let's just start with this. My understanding is that Cenk Uygur is running for Katie Hill's seat the seat formerly occupied by Katie Hill in a special election in California's. I can't remember what district it is. Can we get your comment? Are you 25th district? Are you how upset about this? Are you?
No, you know what? I'm just thrilled for him. Cenk is really. I love working for Cenk because he's just one of the most principled guys I know. He's a great boss, so if he wins, obviously I'll be sad to see him go. But he's built something great here at TYT where we can all carry the mantle, and I'm just super proud that he's taking this next step and trying to make a change, because he would be an unbelievable congressman. Can you imagine him just facing off against Jim Jordan in Congress? It would be a sight to behold.
Yeah, I would pay good money for that. I mean, I very well may actually. He has raised, apparently, in less than 36 hours. In the first 24 hours, my understanding, he's raised $100,000. Yeah,
I haven't checked, but I would not be surprised. He really has the ability to bring the progressive community together. We all may disagree on like some aspects of, he's disagreed with different progressives on Russiagate, as they call it, all of those things. But when it comes to core progressive values, there's no one like Cenk who can carry that mantle.
Yeah, it would be pretty fun to see him in Congress, I have to say.
That's an understatement. Yeah,
yes,
it really
is actually an understatement. But all right, well, let's broaden out. Big news, obviously, today. Roger Stone convicted now. I don't think he's going to get a pardon from Donald Trump. That would be a little bit awkward this far out. I would imagine that's not going to come until after November of 2020. So Stone's going to spend a little bit of time in prison, and would be my guess. I mean, I guess maybe they can appeal, but we'll see.
It's likely prison time, according to the reporting on this. I mean, it's 7 separate counts, so there's got to be some sort of prison time involved.
It didn't seem like the jury needed too much time either. I think in one day's worth of deliberations, he was done on all 7. And
well, they just took a look at his suits and said, this guy, there's no one who hasn't committed a crime who chooses to dress like this.
There you go.
As opposed to, unless you're like a 1980s pimp in some sort of historical movie.
I got to think somewhere right now, Eliot Spitzer is probably got a smile on his face about this. People would have to go back and read into Eliot Spitzer, former governor of New York's travails. Stone took credit for basically blowing the whistle on Eliot Spitzer's use of prostitutes. But leaving that aside.
Certainly.
And impeachment is ongoing. Apparently 14 million people watched it the other day. I suspect by next week we're going to see people, we're going to see like 18, 19 million people watching some of the hearings contemporaneously. Without getting into the weeds of the actual impeachment, give me your sense of the political implications of it going forward. Now, and just to be clear, you've been going around, you've been hitting the campaign trail a decent amount, haven't you?
Yeah, a decent amount. Less so in the past few weeks. I've kind of had a slow few weeks, but I've been doing a lot of, I went to New Hampshire, I went to different candidate town halls. I've been speaking to different supporters. At least among the base, the Democratic base, impeachment is at the top of people's lists of priorities, and that is only expanded because of the, it sounds like an oxymoron, but leadership of Nancy Pelosi to push this forward. That's really how you get these topics into the voters' consciousnesses, the collective consciousness, is by leading and pushing forward your narrative, and fortunately she was pressured into doing so.
Oh, so from your experience on the campaign trail, this was a big priority for people?
Yeah, I from talking to Democratic voters, say at when I go to a Beto O'Rourke town hall, if I talk to them not just about he's not in the race anymore, but if I was talking to them, not just about his candidacy, it was always just, we got to impeach this guy. We got to get this guy out. That was a pretty resounding calling card for all of the Democratic constituencies when I was speaking to them.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that, because there's that story about that guy, Van Drew in New Jersey, who was one of the two Democrats who voted against moving forward with impeachment proceedings. And apparently his the rating on his race has started to move towards Republicans after that vote. I don't know what the connection is there, but
well, it's almost like when you have to make your own case, and conceding that the president, who is in the opposition party, has not committed a crime, or you're not going to pursue the ramifications of that crime. That makes you look weak, and weakness never sells in any race.
It's interesting. And let's just talk a little bit about the timing here, and the way they're approaching this overall. I mean, there's obviously some of the there's controversy, and I'm not even sure where I land on this anymore. But there's multiple options on way that you handle this. You do the Ukraine thing, and then you move on to Turkey, or you do the Ukraine thing, and you move on to the IRS whistleblower, who Richard Neal apparently has just basically buried in someone's basement, I guess. You move on to emoluments, or you move on to obstruction, or and on, or you just say, we're just going to do the Ukraine thing and send that to the Senate. Give me your take on that, and we should also just mention something that, we've been talking about here for a while, which is, if the timing is such that it goes to the Senate in January or February, you are taking two of the leading candidates for the Democratic primary. And there's a new poll out today that shows that Michael Bloomberg's eating into Joe Biden's lead, and Bernie Sanders is now tied for first, or I think in first, more or less tied based on the margin of error nationally amongst Democrats. But you're taking Sanders and Warren basically off of the playing field in Iowa, because they're going to have to be in the Senate every day if there's these trials. Just give me your overall, I guess, your omni perspective on this.
So yeah, there was a lot there. I guess I'll just address the last thing about Sanders and Warren and the candidates that don't really matter, like Harris and Klobuchar being taken off the campaign trail potentially for two months, around that, for a trial in the Senate. There's no doubt in my mind that it will hurt both Sanders and Warren, and that's a terrifying thought, because we see someone like Buttigieg surging in Iowa, and he's arguably the most dangerous of them all. And, it gives someone like Buttigieg an opportunity to talk about his, put his voice out there and make his case independent of Donald Trump, where when you have Warren and Sanders stuck in the Senate talking about Trump all the time, that's the trap that the right wants the left to fall into, in a sense. Because if you don't make your own case, and you're just talking about how Trump is bad, we all saw what happened in 2016. Now, I think it hurts Warren more than Bernie Sanders. I was putting the answers than Bernie Sanders. That was bizarre.
Right. Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, right, exactly. Because he has a stronger organizing base that's, number one, an infrastructure that's been put in place since 2016. And secondly, just because of the emphasis that his campaign has put on grassroots organizing, and not that she hasn't, but the extent of his reach is just further in that regard.
That's interesting. I mean, can you give me an assessment? Have you been around enough to give me an assessment of what the organizations look like in the various states, in the first several, primary states?
I couldn't give you like a full assessment there because I don't really have one specific beat, and we'll just go and cover whatever candidate is interesting, and it's hard for me to be that embedded. But just really from what I've learned and what I've seen anecdotally, that's my assessment of the strength of the organizing of Sanders' campaign.
What about in Iowa? Can you rate the various groups? I'm curious because I know Buttigieg seems to have
I've yet to go to Iowa. I've yet to go to Iowa.
Okay,
bizarrely, yes. But yeah.
All right, and so with that said, what do you think is going on?
Siren.
Yeah, that's okay. What do you think is going on with Deval Patrick? I mean, I understand why Bloomberg got into the race because he's surrounded by people who are probably making a lot of money and stand to make more money if he jumps into the presidential race. And Bloomberg could do whatever he wants, and nothing's gonna cost him anything, right?
Right.
And there are people saying to him like, look at Mayor Pete, you're Mayor Mike. You're a million times better than him in everything, and you have the same politics, and he's doing well.
Right.
You should jump in the race. And he goes, oh, well, thank you, I will, and that's it. But what about Deval Patrick? That just mystifies me. I have a theory, but I'm curious as to what your perspective is.
So there was a great piece in the New Republic that was out yesterday. I'd encourage everyone to read it just because it kind of aggregates all of the different notable, terrible things about Deval Patrick's record. But it also makes note and includes aspects of this Politico piece that was out now that he's announced that says from sources close to Deval Patrick himself that this is coming from Wall Street. I mean, that's almost a direct quote. I don't have the article in front of me, but and they explain this is a direct response to Wall Street anxiety about Warren. Now, they don't mention Bernie Sanders because they don't think he's a legitimate threat to actually win the nomination, and he's just, the dismissal is embedded in any conversation that's people are having, the elites are having about Bernie Sanders. But that's really the admission, is that he is they're basically seeing that Biden is faltering. Buttigieg, I don't think people think he has a legitimate shot, although again his surge in Iowa is troubling. But I think that they are scrambling to try to find an alternative that they think is palatable, that can represent Wall Street and the establishment's interests. And, Mike Bloomberg might have been a little too on the nose by being just a straight up billionaire with zero charisma, and who just proudly locked up black people and encouraged stop and frisk and helped gentrify New York City, and was a literal Republican. That might have been a little too on the nose for the subterfuge that the donor class wanted to push through. So they're going with Deval Patrick, who, by the way, as governor, had the equivalent of a supermajority with both chambers being blue, and did nothing except basically institute Mitt Romney's healthcare plan, the state version of Obamacare, and didn't expand upon it at all. Raised the state sales tax, which disproportionately hurts poor people. And he also legalized casino gambling and blech.
Right.
What else? So we talked about what Obama did when he had a supermajority for those 2 years from 2008 to 2010, and how little he did there. Deval Patrick did even less, and he had it his entire tenure.
Yeah, I mean, and we should say that had he jumped into the race, let's say, I don't know, a year ago or 8 months ago or something like that, he would have had a lot of support from the sort of the Obama wing of the party. I mean, he was very popular. Now a lot of those people have signed up on other campaigns. A lot of donors are committed to other people. I just find it hard to buy that, like, that they think he's going to jump into the race at this late date, overcome Biden, overcome Buttigieg, and then have enough strength to be like, to me, this is what it sounds like a little bit to me, right? Is Fred Thompson stayed in the race in 2008, I think it was, in the Republican primary, essentially to help John McCain in South Carolina by making sure that no one ran away with South Carolina from McCain. McCain wasn't going to win it, but they wanted to make sure that nobody else, I can't remember who the candidates who were better suited for South Carolina, and he was basically a stalking horse. It seems to me that if I am worried about Joe Biden's candidacy, I am worried that he's going to get slaughtered in Iowa and slaughtered in New Hampshire. That if he comes in, that if Warren or Bernie or both of them beat Biden by 5 or 10 points, right? If he comes in and he only gets like 12% in New Hampshire, and maybe Buttigieg comes in third, that's going to send a very, very strong signal that Joe Biden is not as electable as people think, and that's going to hurt him in South Carolina, and then so on, so on. But Deval Patrick, he goes up to New Hampshire, he's automatically going to get 10% of the vote, it seems to me. Particularly with the types of people who are in southern New Hampshire, who are there, sort of like more oriented towards that. And I think he's jumping in the race just to make sure that the gap between Joe Biden and probably Warren from their perspective, but I think they're sleeping a little bit on Bernie, is just not so large to mitigate the perspective on Biden's loss. Other than that, it doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, you worked out, you walked through that article. That doesn't it's still like, could they be that stupid? Like that somehow Deval Patrick can jump in at this late date and do anything except for ruin Biden's campaign if he was to run throughout?
I think I like your theory, but I think that there's an underestimation of the role of sycophants in these wealthy people's inner circles. Deval Patrick has been floated by a lot of people in establishment arenas as a viable candidate for a very long time. And they have really internalized that neither Sanders nor Warren can defeat Donald Trump because they're too far to the left. And it's convenient for them to feel that way because then they can continue to do politics as usual and take donor money. But Deval Patrick probably sees, Biden's weakened. He's not going to win. Buttigieg, people don't think he has a realistic chance to win because he has 0 black people that support him. So Deval Patrick thinks I'm the alternative. I'm the one that can win. And that's, you can pay a lot of consultants to tell you that. And speaking, I thought that was a really good point about New Hampshire because people who don't follow politics a lot, I think, underestimate the close-knit political Democratic establishment of Massachusetts. So, when Elizabeth Warren floats Deval Patrick as someone who would be in her administration, which was ludicrous, a lot of this is, it's almost like New York in a certain way, but a little more progressive. That it's very tight-knit. There's a lot of machinations in the Massachusetts Democratic circles, and people in New Hampshire, take it seriously and know those names. So not only will I think Deval Patrick hurt Joe Biden in New Hampshire, but I think he will hurt Elizabeth Warren.
Yep.
Not for ideological reasons, but because of the power of that Massachusetts Democratic machine.
Yeah, I mean, I get that. I mean, that's my point. It's like, I think he probably cuts into Warren more than he cuts into Biden. And, and I think the idea being, I mean, he may cut into Biden a little bit in New Hampshire, but I suspect he cuts into Warren more. And that's going to it's not going to swing it to anybody, but it's gonna keep the race flat as opposed to like make it look like Biden lost big, right? Like Biden's 10 points, if there are 3 other people who get 12 points or 15 points, looks a lot better than if 2 of the people get 20 points. And he's that far out of it. I mean, that's my theory. And then I guess the other thing is that if Deval Patrick becomes, a significant player in this, if he's able in some way to aggregate, some of these votes across the spectrum, it makes a brokered convention that much more possible. And, maybe you throw your hat in the ring thinking like, maybe I'll be the one that they choose.
Yeah. I think you're right there. I mean, the idea of a broker convention is so terrifying that I don't even want to imagine it, to be honest with you.
I think things are about to get a lot more complicated as we go forward, but I guess we will see. I don't know if we've left anything on the table here. I mean, anything that you think we should be thinking about going into these hearings next week and the debate that's going to happen on Wednesday night? I mean, do you have any sense of what's going to happen with this debate? We won't see Deval Patrick. We won't see Bloomberg. It's like we're going to see. This is the first time that Buttigieg is going to come in there with some swagger, right? I mean, this is going to be the closest he's going to been to the center of the dais. Do you think people are going to go after him? Yeah,
I mean, weirdly, I don't know if they will go out after him, but you're saying like, oh, this is going to be the first time he has some swagger. He's had some unearned swagger for quite a long time. I mean, I do think he's a threat. I think, what is so frustrating when I'm talking about him to, friends and family, it's just, oh, he's so smart, but what is he saying? Nothing. So you can say big words. He's not saying anything at all. And I think, I've talked about this before a little, just this fetishization of intelligence without like really any of the substance that's necessary for intelligence that occurs on the left, or really not the left, but Democratic voters. That's the entire thing that's buoying Buttigieg's campaign. And just another point on him. I mean, it takes a specific kind of arrogance to run for president, being mayor of a small college town. I mean, he did it. He ran for DNC chair. Now he's doing it now. And he really thinks he's the top dog, and it's going to be between him and Warren, as he said on that Showtime show.
Well, I guess it remains to be seen. He's very smart. He speaks a lot of different languages.
Tulsi Gabbard's still making the cut. I mean, what was that? She was polling at 6% in New Hampshire. Goes to show that fighting with Hillary Clinton, her input and her fall from grace in the Democratic Party is as follows. Her fighting with someone gives them a polling bump more than her endorsing or speaking positively about them.
Yes.
So Tulsi Gabbard is now riding the wave of fighting with Hillary Clinton.
To be fair, if you look into that, it is New Hampshire is one of those crossover states where independents and Republicans can vote in the Democratic primary. And so much of her support, I think, actually comes from non-Democrats, which is,
right.
Those are the rules, and that's good. But I'm not surprised that. What did you think that was about? I mean, I was just about to say goodbye, but I still can't figure out, like, is Hillary Clinton that just sort of, I mean, I'd like to think that when people like Hillary Clinton, who were politicians for years and a top diplomat, right, that, she was the head of the State Department, for God's sakes, that when they go and they make public announcements like that, or pronouncements, that they have an agenda and that they've thought this thing through, and they think if I say this, X, Y, or Z is going to happen. What did she think was going to happen? Do you think that she did? I mean, why did you think she did that? Do you think she just did it because she hates Tulsi Gabbard?
I think the whole Democratic establishment hates Tulsi Gabbard. That doesn't mean that Tulsi Gabbard is a progressive or a good candidate by any stretch, but what's frustrating is just as the legitimate criticisms of Tulsi Gabbard were breaking through, waffling on Medicare for all, her connections with far-right leaders, her excuses of Gujarat, her countless just weird concessions to the right, just as those were breaking through, Hillary Clinton has to come through with this BS about her being a Russian asset, and then that galvanizes everyone to think that maybe all criticism of of Tulsi Gabbard is as ridiculous as Hillary's. But when it comes to what she was trying to do there, I think people in the establishment do like to kind of poo-poo her. I mean, we saw with Kamala Harris saying she was a top-tier candidate after Gabbard went after her, and now they're basically, very close in polling. And then we're seeing it with Hillary Clinton as well. So it's frustrating because I feel like as a progressive, I'm caught in the middle there where I'm grossed out by the establishment attacks on her. But
you don't want to be put in a position to defend things that you don't think are defendable.
I certainly do not want to defend Tulsi Gabbard, and I often deliberately antagonize her supporters on Twitter.
Where do you think the support that she's getting in New Hampshire, at whose expense do you think that came from?
I don't know. I mean, your point about independents and Republicans being able to vote makes sense. I don't know what her voter base within the Democratic electorate is, except for disaffected Democratic voters who are upset with the establishment, but that's right. All Bernie voters.
Exactly. That to me is the only rational explanation for what she thought that she was doing. If she actually had an agenda, I think it was her way. I think that in her mind, if I pick a fight with Tulsi Gabbard, it's going to hurt. It's going to shave off a couple of points off of Bernie. That's what I don't know if that was the case, but that to me seems like the most rational explanation for why she did that. It's either she had no idea what she was doing or that's what she thought she was doing, but who knows?
But she's also able to throw bombs without stakes these days, and Tulsi Gabbard doesn't have any defenders.
Well, that's true, but if Hillary Clinton has an agenda that is beyond a resentment of Trump, understandable, it would also be a resentment of Bernie Sanders. And if she was to if she wanted to feel like she was playing a role, that would be the role. And I'm not convinced that Deval Patrick's not the guy who's doing that same thing with Warren. Like I think the people have been. I don't think it's that nefarious. People want to support their policy agendas and want it reflected in our government, even if they're not in their government. Certainly Hillary Clinton feels no less of a stake in this than you or I, right? Right. And so if I get up here and I talk about Pete Buttigieg, I'm doing so because I hope I'm convincing a couple of people not to vote for Pete Buttigieg. I would imagine she operates under a similar agenda, but of course has far more power and is probably a lot more savvy about these things. But who knows?
I don't know if she's more savvy than you, Sam. I think that's too high of a bar for her. Well,
Emma, I'm going to take that as a compliment, and that is the perfect way to end this segment. Emma, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Folks can follow you on Emma Vigeland on Twitter. We'll put a link, obviously, in the podcast description. Thanks so much, Emma. Always a pleasure.
Yep. Thanks so much, Sam.